Think about this life skill. And this just happened recently with a young man who had a dead battery. And having a dead battery, say, well, just get some battery cables, hook it up to another car. And he goes, I don't even know what you're talking about. This is a young man who's in college today.
Yeah.
And so I taught my kids and my daughter, oh, if you're going to drive a car, these are things you need to learn.
Yeah.
I might not be around to help you with those kind of things.
Well, hey, friends, welcome to this week's episode of The Boundless Show. We are now in October. This is very exciting for some of you because you know that I straight up throw shade on those of you who are like, pumpkin spice lattes in July. I'm not having it. But now we are in fall and I'm okay with that. Okay, so you heard it here first. Here we are for our round table. We have got a great group of folks here who are, I'm just going to say, not in their 20s. And they are going to share life advice. All of those things. Have you guys ever had kind of your grandma maybe say something to you assumptively like, don't you know how to do that? And you're like, no, I don't, because no one ever taught me. There are myriad things in my life that I feel fall into this category, including I have tried to learn how to sew on a button probably 9 or 10 times, and I still can't do it. I'm blaming it on the kind of thread, or I'm going to blame it on the teacher that tried to tell me. I want to just spread the blame. But this group is going to give us some great practical advice on some of those life skills that you may not have, but that you may need. And this is just going to be a fun conversation. We're not going to talk about churning butter or stuff that you don't need to do. We're talking about things that actually still make sense, okay? So we are welcoming to the table Loann, Doug, and Roger. Hey, you guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Very good to have you here. Thanks for being willing to be here. And sorry, I mean, I just assumed y'all aren't in your 20s. I apologize if I made that mistake.
The assumption was correct.
Okay,
Yes.
it was. Okay. They know you, Roger. You've been on a lot.
That's
they know
true.
you're okay. You're a solid
another way of
32.
saying I'm old.
You're solid 32. We're giving you 32 right now. Okay. So I want to start off by asking, because again, I referenced sewing on a button. I grew up in California where a lot of us didn't know how to do anything. Okay, let's be honest. Roger's going to take issue with me because he's from California. But then I went and I lived a season in the Midwest, and I'm like, who are these people that are canning vegetables and doing all these prepper level type things that I'm like, do we not just go to a store and buy chicken breasts in a package? I don't know any other way of doing that. So I want to throw it out to the table here of what do you recall? And it could be from when you were a kid, a teenager, moving into adulthood. What are some of those things that you learned? And what has been specifically useful to you in adulthood, even in the 21st century where we think everything's automated and we don't need to learn new stuff? What would you say? What would you put on the table? Loann, let's start with you. Ladies first.
I will represent the Midwest. Okay, so we'll start
Excellent.
there.
She is rocking a cool flannel, so that's good.
Learning seriously basics of cooking and baking and homemaking, not just from my mom, but my grandma, my mom's mom. And as a no longer 20-year-old for a few years, those are extremely cherished memories, but they are also very practical. That I know that, when groceries had gotten really slim, that can open up that pantry and be like, okay, we've got this, what's in the fridge or freezer, pull it out, make a meal. Yeah. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a great big thing, but just simple stuff.
Okay.
Simple foods do.
So explain to us, what did that look like? Was this your mom or grandma saying, get on in here to the kitchen because you're going to help me with this? Was it just hands-on training, or was it just assumptive because you were part of the family flow in doing this?
All of the above.
Okay.
I don't remember when it started. So
Okay.
from a very young age,
Yeah.
I mean, I had siblings and we lived out in the country, and grandma and grandpa just down the road. And it was a great big family garden that we
Okay.
worked in from a young age. I
Yeah.
will tell you this, I do
Also
not
something
miss the
people don't
potato
know how to do.
patch pulling
Yeah.
bugs off of it.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
I'll gladly go to Walmart and buy my bag of potatoes.
Yeah.
But it was never really just, hey, come learn this. It was more that it was everybody hands-on because it took everybody to do the garden. We raised our own cattle, and then Dad then had pigs, and that's a different story. You don't want that in the summertime with windows open.
Oh, boy.
I'm just going to say.
Okay.
But I remember I was so thrilled that at 9 years old is when I did my first from scratch everything pie.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was just so thrilled. I'm sure it was absolutely atrocious, but Mom and Grandma raved over it. So,
And you tried, and that was something that you actually took a stab at. Okay, Doug, you're actually a Gen Xer, which isn't, because so we're not, you're not, ancient, not that these other two are, but you're kind of one of these guys that's
I'm a
like,
guy still.
You're an Xer, but you still probably had to learn some stuff. What do you remember from your earliest days of just things that you knew you were going to have to figure out?
The thing that I would say was most beneficial to me that I still carry on to this day and that I taught my kids was work ethic and resourcefulness. And my parents and my grandparents didn't make things too easy for me. Like I remember when I was 7, I learned how to make a rubber band ball, and I love that.
We're talking about actual life skills. Okay, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the life skill I learned from this was, I needed a lot of rubber bands, and my grandmother did have her friends save all their rubber bands off their newspapers. But
funny.
But I also used to go door to door when I was just 7 years old and ask people for rubber bands because I needed a lot of rubber bands to make a big rubber band ball.
Yeah.
And and then that carried into doing a lot of just enjoying door to door sales. And at a young age, I would always go out and try to sell stuff. And then, my mom had me get a paper out when I was 10 and didn't drive me around to deliver the papers. I had a bicycle and got up early and delivered those papers and had to collect all the money.
Wow.
And those are things that work ethic and just knowing that it wasn't just money doesn't grow on trees, right? It which is what everybody says. But you had to, that came from work.
Okay.
That you would earn.
It is
things.
so funny that you said that because I had not thought of this at all. But I will say, in echoing that, I killed at school sales. So I was like we had to sell magazine subscriptions. We sold candy bars. We sold weird cheese and sausage platters. And I was always, and part of this was just being an overachiever and a consummate people pleaser, but I was always just the top school salesperson. And I 100% went door to door and was just like in people's faces, like, and that whole having a conversation in real life with a person and having to make a case for something, I agree with you. That's a lost art.
If we had gone to school together, Lisa, we would have been neck and neck. I mean, I would have been fighting for the top spot.
There is no way. It would not have eclipsed me. There is absolutely no way. Roger, how about you?
Well, it's funny that what you just said is I have grandchildren and now they're all involved in sports and school and things like that. And they don't go door to door. We get a text that says,
right,
hey, here,
With
go on this side and buy these things,
Yep.
So it's a little different. But I am not from the Midwest. I am obviously, like you said, from Southern California. But my mom grew up in the Midwest, and so did my father. And so as a young boy, I learned these kind of skills. My dad handed me what they call a Purdy paintbrush, Purdy. They're very good paintbrushes. And I was at probably about 5, maybe 6, 7, somewhere around there. And he handed me a paintbrush and he said, son, I'm going to teach you how to use this because someday it's going to save you a lot of money by knowing how to paint. I mean, literally, my father was a building and painting contractor. So I learned at a very young age and was in the construction sites with him as a kid how to paint. My mom, on the other hand, said these kind of things to me growing up. She said, I am not going to allow my boys to not learn the things they need to learn to where their wives become slaves. So as a young boy, I literally learned, you said sewing on a button.
Yeah.
I could sew on a button like nobody's business.
Wow.
I could run a sewing machine. And in fact, in my house, I actually do most of the sewing.
Huh.
I learned how to cook. I learned how to do laundry. And I remember my bride asking my mom, how do you keep the whites so white and the darks dark? Well, because she came from a family where they threw everything together.
Oh,
my mom says, no, this is what you do.
Yeah.
And so I learned those skills in terms of even doing laundry and keeping whites, darks, darks, and that kind of thing. But then my father was very mechanical.
Okay.
So what about a life skill? Think about this life skill. And this just happened recently with a young man who had a dead battery. And having a dead battery, say, well, just get some battery cables, hook it up to another car. And he goes, I don't even know what you're talking about. This is a young man who's in college today.
Yeah.
And so I learned skills watching my dad in the garage.
Yeah.
How to wrench a car, how to jumpstart, how to do you change oil, and and so I taught my kids and my daughter, if you're going to drive a car, these are things you need to learn.
Yeah.
I might not be around to help you with those kind of things. So
it's
we learn those
interesting because
skills.
kind of like similar then to what I asked Loann, what did that look like for you to learn these? Like when you're saying, I mean, you just mentioned you were in the garage with your dad.
Yep.
This is so interesting to me because it's almost like we had more time back then, or people had more time. You were doing stuff more in real life with other people, part of your family, instead of being squirreled away, I guess, texting people or playing video games or doing whatever. Texting people to support your school fundraiser.
Yeah.
So that is interesting. But even like, I don't know of an average boy, Roger, who would be like, oh, yeah, Mom, show me how to do XYZ in the kitchen. Yeah. So somehow she was like, no, you're coming in here and doing this.
Yeah. And not only did she say, come in here and I'm going to show you how to do this, because there was always that concept of how are you going to teach somebody?
Yeah.
Well, first you tell them how to do it, then you show them how to do it, and then you have them do it. And then once they become proficient at doing it themselves, then you have them, which is what my parents did with us, you have them tell somebody else how to do it, show somebody else how to do it. And then once that, if I could say third party has learned to do it, well, then you knew that the second party had the life skill. So in my house, because being an Italian family, there's always cooking stuff going on. There's always the men are in the garage, doing their thing. But my dad would, being in construction, and then working on his own cars in the days when you could, it was I sat over the hood and said, "Show me. Okay. How do you change a spark plug? How do you do this?" And so we learned those things. But then we had the support back then. Us older people would remember auto shop and wood shop and metal shop and homemaking classes and things like that in high school, which maybe are a little bit absent today.
Yeah. No, that's so interesting. And it really is. I mean, what you're saying is something I remember I was the quintessential latchkey kid. Both of my parents worked from the time I was really young, and they just had to. And this was in California. So I was the one from probably middle school on who had to start getting dinner ready because my parents were not going to be home on time. So I came home from school, started homework. Then I had to figure out, having had a real actual phone call from my mom or someone or a conversation that morning about what I had to get started or whatever that looked like. But it's funny because even with that, I don't consider myself a good cook. I remember then my sister, who at a very young age married a farmer, and she got a complete masterclass in all of this business from her mother-in-law, who could get a roast on the table in what seemed like 12 minutes. I don't even know, but she was nuts. And so I think it's one of those things where you're like, my goodness, like all these things that you assume, like these people know how to do it, and you think they're just especially gifted, but they're actually learning something. What are some of the other like down and dirty things that you remember, or things that you wish, like if you could teach something in 30 minutes to someone today who was a 20-something, what would you go after? What would you try to teach them? Loann, you have kids. You have young adult kids.
Yeah.
What do they still need to know?
Everything maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
My oldest daughter and I have often said we would love to be able to just throw open the doors and have people come in and be like, let's do cooking classes. What is it you want to learn? What, you don't know what you don't know, but do you know how to make homemade pasta? Simplest thing.
Yeah.
So easy. And so rewarding to do those kinds of things. Do you know how long it takes to bake potatoes and a roast so that they both come out of the oven at the same time? Just simple things. And as you've all been talking, I've been sitting here thinking that teaching these kind of life skills is a discipleship of sorts. It has to be intentional.
Yeah.
Very rarely do we pick up things by osmosis.
Yeah. No, that's good.
And because everybody's always going to need fed.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to need in this day and age to know how to change their tire. If you don't want to spend $150 for a mechanic to come mobile and do it.
Yeah.
Even us kids, Dad and us, he wouldn't let us kids get our driver's license till we knew how to drive a stick shift. And he'd take us out on the hill where you were stopped and you had to get that thing. And he'd he'd make sure that we've got traffic behind us, so you knew you didn't want to hit the car behind you when you pushed in that
that's
clutch.
funny.
But
good.
just to have, I wish the younger generation that they knew that they had the freedom to ask.
Yeah.
There's no shame in asking.
Yeah.
Teach
that's
me
good.
this.
So, Doug, I was going to ask you, because you've been on the show before, because you are just a straight up savings expert. And here's another thing that I remember from back in the olden days when I got my first job. And that was like balancing a checkbook. Like I don't even know the last time I actually squared my own account. I just looked digitally. I've got apps. I'm like, okay, I just let that go. There was something satisfying about writing something in a ledger and feeling like at the end of the month it squared up. You probably still balance everything, but what would you? He's all like, yeah, I do. But I've just like let that go. I'm like, Lord, please have this be accurate, whatever. But what would you say? I mean, for you with 20-somethings, anything related to budget or finance, what do you feel still needs to be learned?
It's funny. You would be surprised. When I was in my 20s, I wasn't very good at all of that. I didn't have a budget. I didn't balance my checkbook. And I was very frugal. I like saving money. And I learned lessons like you can put money to work for you. I learned those kinds of things, but I wasn't really good at understanding like how to make a budget work for you. And a budget, it can be your friend and can really make you feel like you have a lot of freedom. It's not constricting. But it took me getting married to my wife, who was much better at budgeting than me, to learn that. But it was like very freeing to learn how to budget and learn the discipline of actually living with the budget and living according to the budget. And so that's just a major life skill, just understanding how to let money work for you and let money be your friend, because it can quickly become your enemy if you're in debt and something that you dread. And the other thing is I'm still learning to have a good relationship with money, because it isn't all about squirreling away, money and saving. And I've learned over the years that I haven't enjoyed my money well enough. And so there's that side of it too, but you want to do it within a budget. You want to make sure you're saving for good experiences while you're young but also learning how to live within your bounds and save money where you can. And so I've always got a million tips on how to stretch a dollar, and you have to identify where there's a lot of maybe waste in your life, I think, and where you might be buying things that you don't use, or food that you throw away, or those kinds of things. Sometimes it's easier to save money than it is to earn it. And so you have to really be good at that, I think.
Well, which reminds me of another thing that I think young adults don't know or they haven't learned is, how do you, even straight up going to a grocery store, because I always think of this as someone who's single and I shop for myself. I'm like, I cannot buy this whole head of broccoli and use it before it's bad, and like produce in particular. Or how do you select, like, how do you know, like I'll remember like looking at reels or something about the perfect watermelon, how to select the perfect. And again, this is stuff no one ever told me. And so I'm always going to pick the worst thing unless I look at it or look it up. So now what would you guys say kind of in our last few minutes as we finish out here, where for that young adult that's just like, how do I know what I don't know? And how do I go and ask for this help? What would be your recommendations for them who, those who are maybe eager to say, this sounds awesome. I obviously have things that I need to learn. What would be your encouragement? I mean, I guess we're all going over to Loann's house to learn how to cook. So that'll be a start. That'll be great. Just tell us when and where, Loann. But what would be your suggestions for figuring out maybe what are the most important things right now you need to know? And then how do you go after them?
I think sometimes people or young people have to understand that life is much bigger than Instagram or Facebook. If they're going to be observant, I mean, Doug, what you were just talking about, saving and having a proper concept of money. What goes along with that is the idea of, am I willing to, in a sense, deny myself so that I can save? Unfortunately, we live in the instantaneous, right? And what a big concept right now, buy now, pay later type thing. So what I would say to your question is, I was fortunate and desired to have somebody older than me who had been there and done it, have a mentor of some sort that not only has learned some of those life skills, or because they're older, but that would be willing to teach me. And the fact that the Lord did answer my 5-year prayer for a mentor, when it came to budgeting, for example, he gave me a one-liner. He asked me when I was very young. Diane and I were just freshly married, and he said, "Do you want to stay out of debt?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I do." And he goes, "Well, how are you going to do it?" Well, being an early 20s, I gave him my best theological perspective on how to do this, right? And he looked at me and he said, "Well, those are all good things to do." He said, "However," he said, "I want you to think about this." And this is what he said to me, which became life-changing when it came to how to handle money. He said, "If you want to stay out of debt, then grab a hold of this one-liner." And here's the one-liner: use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. And I looked at him and I said, "Repeat that." And he said, "Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without." Now, I can tell you, Diane and I looked at each other and said, then we'll apply that. And so living under our means, not buying what we wanted, but understanding what the needs were. So having a mentor or somebody in my life that knew the struggles that I would be faced with as I got older was a great advantage to me, because I naturally was a saver. And I was a saver because I listened to my mom and dad, my dad being in construction. I listened to them argue, how are we going to pay the bill? How are we going to do this? And I laid in bed as a kid and I heard those fights. And I grew up saying, I'm going to save. And so by the time Diane and I got married in our early 20s, back when, well, we got married the same year Focus on the Family even started. The bottom line was I had saved enough money to buy our first home. And so those principles that came into play that were enforced or actually taught by having somebody in my life who had been there and done it, who was already successful and learned those skills, I think that's a key. Mentorship is going to become probably one of their best friends.
That's cool. Any other thoughts?
This one, and it may seem like, oh my goodness, this is an old woman talking, but recently I gave our youngest daughter a cookbook that was actually published the year that I was born.
Oh, wow.
And we were just having a Sunday dinner, and she started looking through it, and she's like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. Wait a minute. Do I know what that ingredient is? But some of the directions and stuff, she's like, I'd have never thought to do this. And I think that, looking back into generations past, not because we did everything perfectly, believe me. And I'll drive through and get something here and there, but to look to the past generations to see what can we learn from them, just as I look to my kids, to be like, okay, what are those things out there? Because change with the times as needed, change with the times, but don't change me per se. And just, maybe go to the library and find some of those older books, whether it be the mechanic books, the home repair, the home care kind of stuff. Look and see how things were done and then modify to fit today's time. But I just love, looking back, I think back, the farm where my parents, they bought Grandma and Grandpa's farm when they both passed away. And just those memories there, but also the learning that took place. Don't undervalue hard physical work or making things by hand. And to your point, Roger, using those things until they're used up.
That's cool.
Yeah, I liked what Roger and Loann said, and the idea of mentorship, and then also just learning from the hard learned lessons of the past. Those are things you can't get in a AI result or in ChatGPT. Like it just, and I think we as parents have learned not to give our kids advice that they don't ask for. But I would encourage Gen Z to ask their parents or grandparents or those previous generations, because they probably want to give advice that maybe they're holding back because they're trying to respect those boundaries. But we're always have things that we could teach and share. So
well, it's funny because when you look at the movies that are out and the different aesthetics that young adults are using, you go back to everything from like mid-century modern to, why are you watching Doris Day films, to there's just a sense of like, this is really cool and I want to see this and learn about it. So I think this is a fun way to do it. And to Loann's point, you can do this by finding maybe an older person in your church or your grandparents if you're living near them. And it really can become not only a relational win for you, but a discipleship opportunity to learn from other generations. And, not that you young adults don't have things to teach too. I mean, again, I always talk about like, hey, show your grandparents how to figure out social media or how to create digital photo albums or how to do all of that.
Right.
It can be a two-way street, but
Absolutely.
if we go after it, it can be really enriching. So thank you guys so much
Thank
for
you.
weighing in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.